Alright, yeah. Uh, a couple things I wanted to say before I get started is one, thank you to a Chris O'Neill for telling me what audio compression is. That helps a little bit with how I'm recording this off of my phone. I'm not exactly going to spend like $100 on a premium microphone for a YouTube hobby that I don't really get anything out of, you know? And this is acceptable is what I'm saying. This kind of quality, at least to me. And second, there's like it was like a year or so before I actually continued doing this, and now I'm finding more opportunities to do so, which is good. Yeah, that one little comment on the last part, it helps, I'm really happy about that. And so this is part 15. You are my most important duty. Fall seemed to come as quickly as Applejack and I could run the leaves off the trees. In the instant those steamy summer days turned to cold autumn evenings, where you could see your breath come out as fog in the night. In the mornings when I flew over Sweet Apple Acres, Applejack and Big Mac's breath and steam could be seen from the air, making them look like that much more hard workers. And after fall comes winter. After our success with the hearth-warming Eve performance, the girls and I all figured we deserved a well-needed break. And I had planned this break for months even. The water park gave me inspiration for it. I hurried down from Cloudsdale to Ponyville in this early morning, hoping Fluttershy would be awake already. I was going to surprise her with something very special, and this time it would be just the two of us. It was going to be a surprise trip. I love puns sometimes. Most of the time I hate them. To Niagara Falls. Together. Oh, and one more little thing I wanted to say is sitting there for like 2 hours listening to yourself cutting out all the dead air and mistakes is something else, let me tell you, to make it as seamless as possible when I get from one sentence to the next. The HMV dog had a video game and its launch was an utter dumpster fire. Thank you, Larry. Guru Larry. Anyways, I'll spare you the details of how she reacted, but let's just say they were more than ecstatic. We took a train there and got our hotel room, which was very nice. It seemed my weeks of working overtime as a weather pony finally paid off. The room was indeed ritzy, but our first destination was the falls that were only a few miles away from the hotel. By the time we got down there, it was already a late afternoon. And even in the winter, other ponies were eager to see it. I groaned. This was not nearly special enough for Fluttershy. A group of crowded ponies neighing in awe at the falls ahead was not on our agenda. And Pegasus ponies weren't allowed to fly up either for a better view. It all stunk. Man, Fluttershy, I'm really sorry about this, I whined. Rainbow, it's fine. Really, I'm having a delightful time, she whinnied happily. I shook my head, putting my wing over her back. Nah way, we gotta find a better view. My eyes scanned the area when I saw a cave nearby that led to behind the waterfall. Of course, a sign that said no trespassing was not enough to stop me. Come on, I urged her to follow me, despite her replies in confusion. She followed nonetheless until we reached the mouth of the cave. Rainbow, it says no trespassing, she said sheepishly. I frowned. It was times like this I wanted to scold her for being so cautious and careful. I tested the waters and waited to see how she would react. I lifted my back leg up and kicked the sign over, giving a coy smile. What says no trespassing? I giggled. She looked at me, some resistance in her face before I happily saw a smile creep across it. She trotted past me, brushing her tail across my nose, sending shivers down my spine. Rainbow Dash, the things I let you talk me into, she said, waiting for me to follow. I instantly took the lead and led her across the rocks. Luckily, because of our wings, we were able to bridge gaps that normal ponies couldn't. Finally, we arrived to the back of the waterfall. It was truly much more beautiful from the back. We stood admiring it for a few moments in awe before I pointed out a spot for us to share together. She turned to me and smiled, carefully walking over to sit down. I sat next to her and leaned in, pecking her on the cheek. Well, doesn't this beat standing next to a bunch of other ponies for our view? I told you I'd give you a good vacation, I said, winking at her. She smiled at me and nuzzled her head under my chin, sighing happily. Yeah, I'll have to admit that it's much more scenic under here, she said. I looked over at her. The way her cyan eyes shimmered and matched the winter fall in front of her only made her that much more beautiful. Inside here, it really was our own little hideout. Now would be a good time to tell her how I was feeling. All those months of thinking, would I finally tell her how I felt and the decision I had made? Ever since that night when we talked, I had second thoughts about the Wonderbolts. I mean, it's not that I wouldn't. I was just going to put it off. That's what I meant, just putting it off. Fluttershy, I began to speak, inviting her to sit up face to face me. I took her hooves with mine and held them there, looking at her in the eyes. Stunned, she gave me a puzzled look, tilting her head. Rainbow Dash? I began to speak, a smile on my face. I knew she might be really happy about all this. Surely she would be. Fluttershy, you know when spring comes, Wonderbolts will be accepting tryouts. You had to pick the vacation, huh? Instantly, her face fell and she tried to pull away from me, but I wouldn't let her. Why would you ruin the moment by saying something like that? She asked. I could already see tears form in her eyes. I shook my head. Wait, Fluttershy, hold on a second. I continued. I took one of my hooves and forced her to look at me. Sometimes, even now, whenever she would look at me with those sad eyes, I found it hard to even breathe, let alone speak. I went on. But we'll have winter wrap-up, and that is a very busy time for me. I looked at her, waiting to see a reaction. So far, she just kept that sad look. I kept explaining. I have duties in Ponyville. Not that just any pony can fill, you know. I can't just up and leave when every pony in Ponyville needs me the most. I mean, I have weather pony duties that no pony else can even imagine. She tilted her head, a bit more confused, but tears still ran down her cheeks. I wiped one of them away. My smile softened. I leaned in and kissed her tenderly on the lips. And you, Fluttershy, you are my most important duty. Fluttershy stared at me for a brief moment, and I kept the smile on my face. She leaned in close to me, but whispered, Rainbow, do you really mean that? I nodded. The Wonderbolts can wait, but I want to make sure you'll be well taken care of and have had your fill of me, I said confidently, giving a wink. She giggled and I pushed her down onto her back, on top of her now. I rolled over next to her and we went to lay down, facing the waterfall, although our eyes were on each other. Rainbow Dash, I don't think I could ever get my fill of you, she said, placing a hoof on my cheek. I thrilled happily as she did that, and we just lay there together. Despite the cold air around us, it seemed it was so much more warm in here. After a few hours, we were starting to get concerned we would get caught, so we snuck back out and joined the crowd. It was already evening, and the air outside had been much more of a chilly bite than the warm air inside of the cave in the falls. But you just described it as cold. I mean, whatever. I think it's time we head back to our room, I insisted. She nodded and gave me a playful smile before we trotted back to the hotel. As we walked, however, it got uncomfortably quiet. When asking Fluttershy what was wrong, she shook her head, insisting she was tired. After much persisting, I finally got her to tell me what was on her mind. "Dashy, I love you," she said, looking over at me. I nodded, a big smile on my face. "I love you," I cooed, leaning in to peck her on the cheek. She grinned shyly, but continued, "And I want you to be happy." I leaned in, nuzzling her head. "And I am happy. With you." She gave me an unsure look. "Dashy, will not joining the Wonderbolts really make you happy?" I didn't even have to think. I was so sure, so absolutely sure that being with Fluttershy in Ponyville was all I needed to be happy. "Of course, Fluttershy. You and my friends in Ponyville, that's all I need." "It is," I insisted, smiling fondly at her. She smiled a big smile at me and walked closer to me, and it would be quiet until we arrived at the hotel room. I should have read the signs. Why was I so stupid? She was testing me to see how I would respond. I failed miserably, but at the time, I didn't care. I didn't care at all. I was just so happy with her, and I assumed she was happy with me. I lived for the moment, and at that moment, I couldn't be happier. There was a comment on the last part on DeviantArt, and the comment on the top, it was a YouTube link, and it links to the most beautiful girl, Flight of the Conchords. Oh, that's silly. I like that. I hinted at it in the last description. And yep, I was right. I was absolutely right. I was just going off of memory, but part 16. Well, what do you think? That's probably going to be the thumbnail. Back in the hotel room, I plopped onto the bed. It felt good to feel warm again after being under the waterfall. Fluttershy came over and slowly crawled on top of me, much to my surprise. She planted a few delicate kisses on my lips, and before I knew it, I had made my way on top and kissed her from the lips down to her chest. I stopped for a minute and looked over to her and smiled brightly. She smiled too and put her hoof on my face before pulling me up. Confused, I tilted my head. "What's wrong?" I asked. She smiled and sighed, averting her gaze. I brought something here for you, and I wanted you to see me in it now." I grew more confused now. See her in it? What was she talking about? "What do you mean?" I asked. She giggled and hopped off the bed and trotted over to her. Like, if I ever read a story on this channel that's that goes a bit further, let's put it that way. I don't know how I'm going to handle that. Oh boy. She giggled and hopped off the bed and trotted over to her suitcase. She picked it up in her mouth and went to the bathroom. She put the suitcase on the floor and gave me as stern a look as she could. Borderline stare territory. No, not the stare. Anything but that. "Now stay out there and don't peek," she commanded. Growing excited, I nodded and rubbed my hooves together greedily. You know what I heard was a thing? I heard there's this thing called lesbian deathbed. I don't know if any of this is true or not. I guess it's one of those things people might make when they want to make certain arguments, but apparently you just have sex a few times and you just treat each other as roommates. Like, I hope this doesn't happen to them, you know what I mean? Growing excited, I nodded and rubbed my hooves together greedily. Okay, no peeking," I said, wondering what it could be. It must have been lingerie or some sexy outfit. I knew that. I was just anticipating what it could be. Knowing Fluttershy, she'd never do something like this unless she truly felt comfortable with me. I was more happy about the thought of her being comfortable enough to show me a side of her she never showed anybody else than to see her in that outfit. Slowly, I saw the bathroom door open as the room was illuminated by its bright lights. My jaw dropped as I saw her standing there, Words could hardly describe how truly beautiful and amazing she looked in that maid outfit for me. Her coy smile gave off her signature shiggy diggy, a signature shyness that I knew and loved about her. She tried to stand on her two back legs, but practically wobbled. I pretended not to notice as she slumped onto the wall, a deep red blush forming on her cheeks. She closed her eyes shyly, and finally she spoke. "Well, what do you think?" she asked finally, her voice as soothing as velvet, and mine as gnawing as teeth. biting onto your ears. My jaw gaped open as I stared in awe at her, and felt myself blushing uncomfortably as well. I sat up and leaned forward onto the bed, a giant smile on my face that I couldn't help but embrace. I slowly began to trot over to her and pulled one hoof around her neck, bringing her down to meet my lips in a deep, passionate kiss before I spoke. "You look so beautiful, Fluttershy, stunning even," I whispered into her inner ear. She smiled and whimpered happily, nuzzling into my neck. I'm so glad you like it." I let out a loud laugh which seemed to startle her. Before leading her over to the bed, I climbed on top of her and stroked her mane with one of my hooves and leaning down for my lips to hover over hers. I love it. We smiled at each other for a long time and just enjoyed the moment. A nice hotel room at beautiful Niagara Falls, and it really felt like we were the only two ponies in the world. "Fluttershy, I love you so much. This couldn't get more perfect." She smiled shyly and averted her eyes before answering, "I love you too, Jack. I love you too, Dashie." She leaned forward now to kiss me on the cheek. I stood up and turned off the bathroom lights and walked back over to her in the now dimly lit room. I leaned in to kiss her lips, and even in the dark I could still feel her smile against mine. After a few more days, it was time to head back home, unfortunately. We enjoyed the scenery and the fancy restaurants, but we had to get back to Ponyville. As Pegasi, we had to get ready for the winter wrap-up that would be happening soon. And to this day, I still don't understand how the snow doesn't melt. How does this happen? Like, is it asbestos? Is that what that is? Because that's what they had to use for the Wizard of Oz, apparently. And we had to be ready for it to come. It would be up to us to clear the clouds and bring back the birds. I was just so happy I could get into the sky again. Being with Fluttershy has caused me to take life a bit slower now. Not that I minded. As we arrived back in Ponyville, the air was still nippy and cold since it was night. It only made it worse. We hopped off the train before I flew up into the air, encouraging Fluttershy to accompany me. With some hesitation she flew up, trying to balance her suitcase with her flying. She squealed a bit before smiling weakly at me. I smiled back and flew close to her, flying her to the closest cloud for her to sit on. I figured it'd be easier to push her and our suitcases back to Fluttershy's without having her to hurt herself flying. "Here we go," I said, patting the cloud with my hoof. She sat on it and laid down with our suitcases and grew quiet. I knew that there were times when she grew quiet before, so I didn't think too much of it before. It was 10 minutes and everything was still silent. I grew a little worried and finally broke it. "You all right, Fluttershy?" She shrugged and turned to face me. I just feel terrible that you're so held back by me all the time," she admitted. I smiled warmly at her. I plopped my front side on the cloud and continued to fly and reached over to put a hoof to her cheek. She hesitated to let me do it, but gave in and frowned. "You know I don't mind it at all, Fluttershy. I'd rather go slow with you than fast alone, you know." Fluttershy gave a sad giggle. "Yeah, well, that's a silly reason." A small smile formed on her face, which caused my smile to widen. "That's the Fluttershy I know and love. I cooed before we finally arrived at her house. She picked her suitcase up and leaned it up to kiss me on the cheek. "Thanks, Dashy," she said. I smiled and shook my head. "No problem, darling." I pecked her on the lips and flew up into the sky, the night air nipping at my skin. It felt so good to fly like this, but I made sure I didn't pick up speed until I knew she couldn't see me. She would always feel awful about knowing how fast I can go, and she's stuck holding me back. As much as I told her it isn't true, she still wouldn't believe me. I hope I can get her to see that. Maybe someday she'll see I enjoy slowing down for her. Maybe. And again, as a small reminder, this story will abruptly end because it's unfinished. Way back, I would like a good chunk of it was already up, and so I would like sometimes come back and just check to see if there was a new part, and eventually I kind of just forgot to come check back in on it, And this person's replacement account she did attempt a reboot, which I don't think that really went anywhere, but oh well. Part 17, ready for the grand finale? A few months have passed, and again, it all went by in a dash. Fluttershy and I only continued to grow stronger and stronger, and have gone days in a row just seeing each other like before. Although it wasn't as passionate as it was in the beginning. That's what I'm talking about, bro. It's a deathbed. I just enjoyed her company. We would do things like tend to the animals she took care of, and at times I would be so happy to see her fly up and watch me work as a weather pony. I really did feel like we were already married. It was now the end of March, and us ponies in Ponyville were preparing for what we called winter wrap-up, which is essentially cleaning up winter so that spring may come. The ponies on the ground would help clean up the snow and plant the crops, whereas Pegasi would clear the weather skies, and after that would help the earth ponies below. I was in charge of a flight group that was going to move the overcast that was looming over Ponyville. It was our last task. After I let Fluttershy lead the group that brought back the southern birds, the Pegasi formed around me in a circle, and I puffed up my chest and began to speak in a loud voice. "All right, ponies, listen up," I proclaimed loudly, flying around so my voice would project. "Ponyville can't work with all these clouds cluttering up the skies," I said, pointing to the thick blanket of clouds below us. "It's up to us to clear them out. After this, we're done in the skies, okay?" I asked him. I turned to see Fluttershy smile at that announcement. I smiled back at her, giving a wink. "Okay, let's do this," I said, and with that, we all spread out. It had been only 20 minutes, and everyone was moving so slow. Seriously. That's all it's been, is slow, slow, slow. I would occasionally fly by Fluttershy to see how she was doing. She was okay, assuring me she wanted to be in the skies with me. I would sneak a quick peck. Words. Words are tough when they're one syllable. You know what I mean? I would sneak a quick peck on her lips or cheek every now and again, and now and then that I flew by. There, I got the sentence correctly. Always whizzing past her to move the clouds, but even so, I seemed to be moving faster than the ponies around me as well, and it was now that I began to notice it. I felt like I was moving faster than every pony else, like time had just slowed down and I was moving normally. This really messed with my brain, and I tried to focus on my work. But almost a year of just going slow. It didn't even matter why at that moment. I knew the most important reason why I was going slow was because of her, but that didn't register at the time. I just snapped. One bad day is all it takes, is all I'm saying. In an instant, my speed increased 20 miles per hour, and I gathered all the clouds, pushing them along. I would dash past other ponies and snatch the clouds out of their hands. Hand? Dear God. Much to their surprise, and even snatched a cluster of clouds Fluttershy worked so hard to gather, I hadn't even noticed. I was just living for the speed and enjoying it so much. The wind in my mane, the cool breeze hitting my face as I flew, relieving my tenseness before. I felt like I was on top of the world, above all other ponies, and at that time, I really was. I flew above them all, holding the clouds I gathered above my head, the biggest grin on my face. I could hear them cheer my name. Rainbow Dash, Rainbow Dash, Rainbow Dash. They were cheering for me. This was all for me. Ready for the grand finale? I shouted to them all. The Pegasi began to cheer wildly to see what I had planned. I kicked my back hooves at the clouds, and suddenly they dissipate and created tiny small clouds that dotted the sky, allowing the sun from above to shine down onto the ground, lighting up the ground below. The Pegasi all flew around me and patted me on the back. I was laughing wildly, shaking my hooves around and blowing them kisses. Who cleared your work schedule? I asked, flying above them. Then I turned to see Fluttershy. In the distance, tears filling her eyes. My smile and enthusiasm instantly dropped as I realized what I had just done. Oh, Celestia. Rainbow Dash, Rainbow Dash. They still cheered for me, but they became blurred as well. Their cheering suddenly grew mute, and the only sound I could hear was what Fluttershy probably sounded like right now. Was she crying? I couldn't tell. All I could see was her descending from the sky, faster than usual. Fluttershy, wait! I tried to go after her, but was pulled back by the crowd, still wanting to congratulate me. Nice job, Rainbow Dash, said Derpy. Oh, Derpy. Oh, Derpy hooves. Oh, Lord. You should join the Wonderbolts, said a blue Pegasus with a green X cutie mark. What could that even be for? X marks the spot? Is he a treasure hunter or what? Whatever. I shrugged, a weak smile on my face. And leave Ponyville? No, really, Rainbow Dash. Your skills are amazing. You belong in the Wonderbolts, said another Pegasi. I still scanned the area, looking desperately for Fluttershy. Finally, I broke through the crowd, and in the same speed I went to clear the clouds in the sky. Eventually, I caught up to her, and she turned to face me, her eyes narrowing, tears filling her eyes. What are you doing here? I'm boring. Go back to your adoring fans, she said bitterly, a few tears escaping her eyes. I shook my head. Panic set in. Fluttershy, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. I'm sorry. I think I was crying because my cheeks felt wet. Fluttershy, please believe me. My hooves hovered over her back, hoping to get a hug in somehow. She sighed and looked me dead in the eyes. She saw my tears, and this must have softened her because her expression changed. It's fine, Rainbow. I understand. I know you're a real fast flyer. You just wanted the job done, right? She asked, her voice calm. I shook my head, nodding vigorously. Yes. I'm really, really sorry, I pleaded again, grabbing one of her hooves with both mine. She looked at me, a sad look in her eyes. Then a soft smile formed on her face, and she leaned in to kiss me on her forehead before flying away. Did she forgive me? What had happened? I didn't know, but I just floated there for a few more minutes, watching her as she went away from me. I put one of my hooves on my forehead. It was on the spot where she kissed. I sighed contentedly and smiled, flying back home. Maybe she forgave me. Maybe that was her way of saying, I understand, Rainbow Dash. Yeah, it must be. It had to have been that. And from that moment on, I wish I could read the mind of Fluttershy. What would go through her head when she smiled? Did she mean it? When she frowned, did she mean it? When she cried, was it the same reason she would give? I began to ask questions. They would bounce around inside my skull, echoing in my ears. When she said she loved me, did she mean it? Did she believe me when I said I loved her? Did she picture a future with me, like I pictured one with her? A year from now, would I still have my darling Fluttershy? Part 18. Everything is fine. Something changed. After that day, something different happened. I can't describe it, but it felt like the months dragged on longer and longer, and a heavy, humid spring hung in the air. But in the end, I was still the same carefree Rainbow Dash, and I was still the same pony that was madly in love with Fluttershy. But when I say change, I mean she changed. She really changed. It would almost scare me. Occasionally hanging out, I would be almost in tears asking her what was wrong. Her excuse would either always be she's tired, or that she was in a bad mood. I tried to talk to Pinky about it, and she just assured me it was nothing to worry about. But Pinky was always in a good mood. I would relax a bit more as time went on, however. Because if something would happen to our relationship, she could have broken up with me by now. She would have, wouldn't she? But she didn't. And she would still kiss me and want to see me almost every day. So I figured maybe this was a time in our relationship when it didn't always have to be huggy-kissy. But even then, I would always initiate the kisses, trying to get her to kiss me back longer, hold me longer, stay with me longer. She would be the first to break them off, cut them short. But I was still in bliss. I still had this marvelous pony in my life, and I was too blind to see her slowly slipping from my grasp. I didn't give up and would do whatever I could to keep us busy, to continue to find something fun for us. I would even give in and skip days working as a weather pony to help her with the animals on her ranch. And although I could see she liked it, that same glimmer of happiness in her eyes was slowly receding. I don't know, Pinkie Pie, I said, downing my 5th chocolate milkshake. Damn, you're gonna get fat. Keep doing that. It's as if there's something wrong and she won't tell me. I've been around her for almost every single day of the past 2 weeks, and it seems like she's hiding something, I said, looking into my empty glass. Pinkie trotted over, taking the glass from me and beginning to wash it. I don't know, Dashy. Fluttershy is a very complicated pony. Maybe you should try giving her space, she suggested. I felt my stomach churn at those words, and I plopped my head on the counter. I don't know. What if she gets mad at me for that? I asked. She walked over to me and smiled, placing her elbows on the counter and her head in her hooves. Dashy, what I mean is let her decide when you guys hang out or not. I mean, from what it seems like, you've been doing all that. I sat up and bit my cheek before placing bits on the table and hopping off my stool. Don't bite your cheek too often, it'll get raw on the inside. I know that from experience. And also, when you eat cereal, try your best not to bite your lip. Otherwise, you'll start bleeding all over your Fruity Pebbles while watching Persona. Let's Plays. You're right. I'm just going to go back home and go to sleep, I said, slowly walking out of Sugar Cube Corner. I felt my head fall and my ears droop as I walked slowly outside and lifted into the air. I just wanted to sleep this off. Maybe Pinkie was right. She just needed space. As I was about to fly higher, I saw Fluttershy running toward me. Wait, Rainbow Dash, she called, galloping on the ground after me. My heart pounded against my chest roughly as I landed, a confused smile on my face. I was so happy to hear her call my name and run after me. Hey you, what's up? I asked, walking toward her. Can I come up to your place tonight and sleep? She asked. I was a bit confused. What a random request. She wanted to come over and be with me tonight. But why? It didn't matter. I only smiled and nodded. Sure. I was about to head home now since it's getting dark. Come on, I said, helping her up into the air. She allowed herself to place her hoof on my arm, for support as we flew up to my Cloudsdale home. She gave me a small smile and then yawned. "Let's go right to bed," she said. "I'm a bit tired." I nodded, eager to sleep next to her tonight. "Of course, sweetie," I said happily as we flew with each other in the twilight sky. Once we arrived, it was already dark and the full moon was shining brightly. She landed on a cloud that looked similar to the one we sat on the night of the meteor shower. "Let's sleep on this together," she said with a smile. I nodded happily and laid down first, facing the moon. I didn't expect much except sleep, but she came up from behind me and wrapped her front legs around my stomach and nuzzled into my wings. "Good night, Dashy," she said. I smiled to myself and I looked at the moon. "Good night, Fluttershy." I lay awake for a bit longer, though, almost laughing to myself for having those silly thoughts. I shouldn't have even been worrying about all this. Of course she still loves me. She wanted to sleep over with me tonight, and she even wanted to snuggle with me. I shut my eyes happily, enjoying this moment. But I was so happy. I wanted to continue to talk to her. "Hey, Fluttershy, you asleep yet?" She spoke up. I was shocked at how quickly she responded. "No." You can't answer yes to that question. You just can't. I opened my mouth to speak, unsure of how to talk. "Are you okay?" It was quiet for a moment, and she squeezed me tighter, nuzzling against me more. "Everything's fine." That was more than enough reassurance for me at the time. I moved my back closer into her as she held me and shut my eyes, smiling. For tonight, everything was fine. Part 19. I'd think we'd be better off as friends. I woke the next morning feeling groggy. The effects of my delayed work were now shown as the sky was muddled with dark, dreary rain clouds. The only thing that truly jolted me awake was the fact that Fluttershy was sitting at the edge of the cloud, looking down at the ground. I stretched with a small smile on my face, walking over to her. I attempted to give her a hug from behind, and she cringed immediately, ducking away. "No." "No? What did she mean, no?" "Fluttershy, what's wrong?" She turned to look at me. Her face was stoic, inexpressive. I felt a lump forming in my stomach and small explosions go off in my heart. She sighed and rubbed her front leg, looking down. "Rainbow Dash, I think we should talk." She looked up into my eyes, a few stray tears running down her cheeks. I began to tremble uncontrollably. I sat there, unsure of what to do, shaking more and more as my teeth began to rattle. "What is it?" I gulped. I was dreading the next words that were about to come out of her mouth. I've been dreading them since day one, but they formed anyway. "I don't think we should have," she paused, "a sexual relationship anymore." I felt my heart drop to my legs. "I think we're better off friends." At that moment, she said, I shouldn't click my mouse while I'm saying something, because it's kind of neurotic behavior, but whatever. At that moment, she said that my entire world collapsed around itself. I felt my face become soaked in tears, but no sound came out. I fell silent practically. My entire being was being sucked into a void where I just wanted to crash into the ground like a meteor and never wake up. I opened my mouth to speak, but just like Fluttershy, only tears came down. Occasional yelps and whimpers escaped my lips, however, as I tried to process this. "Friends?" Her stoic expression faded, and occasionally I could see her fight so hard not to cry. "Why?" I was able to choke out. She looked at the clouds, not looking me in the eye. I charged inches away from her face. "Why the fuck are you doing this? Give me an answer," I demanded angrily. For that moment, all sadness was replaced with pure rage. But when she batted her cyan eyes at me, the gross sobbing came. I leaned backwards and looked at her, still shaking and crying. She whimpered as well, unable to look me in the eyes. I was holding you back, she said finally. I was holding us back. You and me. This isn't right, she said, pointing to me, then to her. I shook my head. Yes, it is. It's so right. Why are you doing this? It doesn't have to be this way. It was as if my words were bullets hitting steel. She wouldn't budge. And I'm not attracted to girls, Rainbow Dash, she said sadly. Between that and me holding you back from doing what you need to do. It seemed the more calm she grew, the more frantic I became. No, I know, Fluttershy, I said. I know I'm not a stallion. I know that. Don't you think I hate myself for not being a male? I said, hitting my chest. Don't you think I don't already fucking hate that? She cringed every time I yelled. Rainbow, No, Fluttershy, please, I said, sobbing more and more uncontrollably now. Please don't do this. Please don't go. I'll be a wreck. I'll be so by myself. Fluttershy's ears lowered. You'll have the others and... I don't want the others, I shouted angrily. I want you. It's always been fucking you, Fluttershy. I gave up the Wonderbolts the first time for this, and now I don't want them because I want you. I tried so hard to stress this to her. She just continued to shake her head calmly. That's wrong. You can't base your life on me. You have to live your life as if we were never together. You might as well ask me to never fly again, I said through my teeth, looking away, my eyes still overflowing with tears. I remained silent. I knew once this talk was over, she'd be gone. And then, I didn't even want to think about what would happen then. I grit my teeth, hoping I could still reason with her. Fluttershy, I'm so sorry I'm not a stallion. I'm just... That's such a small factor, though, Dashy. It barely mattered on the large scale of this. Something changed within me, and I've changed you, she said, pointing to me. You don't fly fast anymore. You always have to look out for me. You gave up your hopes and dreams for me. That's wrong, Rainbow Dash. You deserve so much more than this. You deserve a pony who won't treat you like I have and hold you back. I cut her off, shaking my head. I deserve you, I said, still sobbing. I looked at her long and hard, and I saw her make eye contact with me. Please, I love you. She didn't answer and slowly began to back away. I felt myself panic even more. I love you. Silence. I love you. Silence. Fluttershy, I shouted, slamming my hooves on the cloud. I fucking love you. It was then I saw more tears and restrained sobs come from her. I know. She turned away to collect herself and sighed heavily. If I say it, then I'll be reminded that I do too. I'm trying to forget I'm in love with you. I've already come to terms that we can't be together. The rage came back. Well, I'm so fucking glad you figured it out way before I did. I shot daggers at her, or tried to anyway. This word right here it's a weird time for like a pun based off of the world that this takes place in. That Discord damn face. That's a bad time to put that there. I could not look at it without breaking down more. To look upon that face and realize that she didn't want to be with me. My mind was clouded with fear. Please, I'll change, I said. She smiled sadly to herself and shrugged. You already have changed. You need to join the Wonderbolts, and I can't be with you anymore. She ran off the cloud and flew off. Just like that. She left me there with my own misery and sadness. I watched her disappear, still calling after her. Fluttershy, I'd call. Fluttershy. My sobs could probably be heard throughout all of Cloudsdale, all of Ponyville even. I watched her disappear, still calling after her. I sat there for a few minutes, letting what just happened sink in. My lips were trembling and my eyes were burning. Then once I realized she was gone, I slowly wrapped my arms around myself and bent over onto the cloud and sobbed uncontrollably. Gut-wrenching, gut-wrenching cries spewed from my mouth as the tears drenched the cloud I was on. Why? Why had this happened to me? To us? I wanted to fly, but my wings, they were glued to my back, and I tried so, but I had to fly. I had to change the scenery. If I was at this spot any longer, I'd surely explode from sadness. I allowed myself to fall from the cloud until my wings spread open, and I half-heartedly flew to Ponyville. I lumbered through the sky as if I was drunk. Tears blinded my vision. This early in the morning, no pony was outside, or even up. But I knew who was. I flew directly to Sugar Cube Corner. Part 20. She's gone. I stumbled through the sky as the crying stopped. Now the shock was setting in, that this was really happening. I felt numb all over, and I was welcoming this feeling of numbness. It was so much better than the fear and crying. The rain began to fall slowly at first, and then it picked up more. Low crashes of thunder and flashes of lightning in the sky signified this storm would last a while. Once I got to the doorstep, I opened the doors slowly. I knew they were closed and only Pinky was awake, now getting ready to open. She turned to me and smiled. "Hey, Dashie," she said in her perky voice. Once she got a good look at me, her smile dropped, and it looked like as though she had seen a ghost. "Dashie, what?" I slowly took a few more steps in before collapsing onto the floor. I just lay there, unable to say anything, or do anything, or process anything. She's gone. Immediately, Pinky ran over to me and threw me into a hug. "Dash, who's gone?" she asked, rubbing my back. I began to choke up now, as it seemed tears poured from every inch of my body. "She's gone!" I sobbed as a steady river of tears streamed down my face. "Fluttershy, she's... Pinky squeezed me tighter. "Dashie, I'm so sorry." I cried. Hard. No, crying isn't the right word. I felt like every sob I let out wasn't hard enough, like chunks of my soul were being spewed out in ugly moans and wails. My salty tears stung my eyes, as I could taste them in my mouth as they mixed with my drool. It was a very ugly crying and a very ugly day. "She just left me," I continued on. "She left me all alone, and I'm so broken." I held my foreleg out in an attempt to reach out to her, even knowing that it wouldn't work. "I can't go on like this. I can't go on without her. I can't do this alone. I can't do this alone." How Mr. and Mrs. Cake slept through my desperate sobbing I'll never know, but they did, and Pinky continued to console. I knew I came to the right pony for comfort. She didn't ask any questions. She didn't try to analyze. She just held me. "I have to get her back," I said, sobbing and moaning. "I have to try to explain to her that I don't need the Wonderbolts, and I need her." She cut me off. "Dashie, I know you already tried that, didn't you?" she said in a sad voice. I remained silent, still crying. She was right. I did do that. Yeah. I continued to scream and sob. It was hopeless. She didn't listen. She didn't tell me she loved me. Not even a kiss goodbye. Nothing. I sobbed even more, clinging to that pink pony holding me. "I'm so sorry, Dashie," she whispered. "I truly am. I had no idea." I slowly slipped from Pinky's grasp and onto her lap as I continued to cry. She slowly pet my mane the best she could to comfort me. "Just let it all out, Dash," she whispered soothingly. I continued to sob harder. "Why, Fluttershy? Why?" I rubbed my face into Pinky's leg, probably soaking it with my tears. Pinky helped me up and led me to the bar. I was still sobbing uncontrollably. She got me a glass of water, and I took very small sips. Now she only looked at me sadly, waiting for me to calm down. Her blue eyes blinked curiously at me. "What happened exactly?" she asked. I took a shaky inhale and spoke. She said that she wasn't attracted to me anymore." Even saying those words brought back more tears as my crying continued. I rested my head at the edge of the bar and continued to cry. Pinky placed her hoof on the back of my neck and rubbed it gently. "Then what?" she asked, urging me to talk about it. I didn't want to, but I knew I had to get it all off my chest now. Then she said I just needed to move on, to join the Wonderbolts, but I can't. I can't because I have to get her back. There's no way I'll ever fly like I used to. She said I had to continue on. I paused, sniffling, as if we never even dated. Pinkie Pie lowered her head and lowered her ears. "Oh dear. Oh, Rainbow Dash, I'm so sorry." She looked up at me now, a few fears forming in her eyes. This is terrible. I slammed my hooves on the table. "I have to get her back. I need your help to get her back, Pinkie Pie," I pleaded. She gave a small smile but sighed. "Rainbow, it won't do any good. If she's doing all of this, nothing is going to get her back right now. Except space. And maybe..." She went on, and I listened. "Maybe you should join the Wonderbolts." I swallowed hard and shook my head frantically. No. If I do, then I'll leave. And The tears came back. "She'll fall in love with another stallion." The thought of that made me sick to my stomach as I hugged myself and continued to cry. Pinkie ran back over to me and rested her head on my back. "It hurts," I moaned. "It hurts so bad. How can I go on without her?" Pinkie took a shaky breath and put her hoof on my back. "I'll be here, Rainbow Dash," she said. "I'll always be here for you." About 20 minutes went by, and I continued to cry and cry. Eventually, for now, however, I was all cried out. I slowly sat up and knew that I must not look like the same Rainbow Dash, as Pinkie only looked at me with sympathy. "Thanks so much, Pinkie Pie," I said, slowly walking to the door. "I just want to go home and go to bed now." Pinkie nodded. "Just go to sleep and come back any time, Rainbow." I almost walked out the door when I bumped into a large, feathered figure. It was hard to tell who it was between the dark, cloudy sky and my tear-drenched eyes. "Watch where you're going, dweeb," a familiar voice spat at me. I scrolled to the bottom just to see exactly how long this part was, and there's the top comment is again something silly. Part 21. Looking a little glum, Dash. I looked up and narrowed my eyes at her. In the dark outside, I wasn't able to recognize her. It was only after a flash of lightning I could make out her face. The griffin stared at me, clicking her beak in frustration, only to have her expression go from bitter to a casual smile. "Hey, Dash." I'm not sure exactly how to go about Gilda's voice. Give me a minute. Oh no. The cap to my water. Oh God. I got it. "Hey, Dash. Long time no see," she said. Her grin, although she intended for it to be friendly, contoured into something rather devious looking. I tried to speak or even smile, but I couldn't. I merely looked up at her, blinking back a few tears. She leaned closer to me, that smile still on her face. "Looking a little glum, Dash," she said. "What's the matter? Goldfish die?" Pinkie hopped over to us, smile on her face. "Oh, hey, Gilda. Listen, can you be kind of nice to Dashie? She's pretty upset." Both Gilda and I shot Pinkie a look. I didn't want Gilda to know at all. My look went with worry, and before I could open my mouth to explain, Gilda talked over me. "Was I talking to you, dweeb?" Dweeb. She shouted in Pinkie's oblivious face. Pinkie tilted her head, a small smile on her face. "Oh, guess not. Well, okay then." She hopped back over to the counter to continue getting the dishes set up. Gilda turned back to me. Her expression fell to an apathetic frown. "So you're upset, eh?" Okay, Dash, talk to me, she commanded, walking into Sugar Cube Corner and looking around. She clacked her beak in frustration. This place is still lame, she muttered. What a rude bitch. I did not want to deal with her right now. I did not need this. I wanted to go home, go to bed, and never face the light of day again. But Gilda blocked my door, and I knew I couldn't really argue with her right now. I looked over to Pinky. If you really want to know, I got into a fight with Fluttershy. I semi-lied. She scoffed, rolling her eyes. Man, Dash, that's wicked lame. Who cares what she thinks of you? She's a dweeb. Besides, you got your other stupid dweeb friends right here. Audacity. Pinky decided to intervene again. Thanks a lot, Pinky. No, you got it all wrong, Gilda, she said in a rather expressive voice. They were dating. In love, even. They broke up this morning, and Dashy here is taking it a bit hard. She gave me the most sympathetic look. I knew she was trying to help, but right now, she wasn't. I groaned and rolled my eyes before giving a reluctant nod. Gilda opened her beak to say something, but instead gave a rather annoyed look, and I knew why. Oh, that's funny, she said, crouching down to meet me at eye level. 'Cause I remember you telling me you weren't into girls. There was a long pause that followed. Remember when I asked you? Yes, I do, I hissed. Of course I remember, and I said no because I wasn't into girls, and obviously that's not true now, is it? I said angrily, narrowing my eyes at her. She merely found this amusing. Whoa, Dash, I guess that bimbo breaking up with you improved your old vivacious tude. Tude. She walked to my side and pressed herself close against my body, leaning forward to whisper in my ear. I like that, she whispered. I felt a shiver run down my wings. Immediately I backed up and looked at her pitifully, just wanting her to leave. So again, certain aspects of the story I remember, certain other ones I don't really have a clear memory on. Did Gilda ask her out or what? Gilda, your girlfriend. Woof. Why are you here? I asked finally, watching her casually stroll into the candy shop, looking around. Looking for some grub. Came a long way here and I'm only just visiting. I have a bunch of other places I need to be. She flipped her hair feathers and hopped onto the bar. I guess this meant they were open because Pinky hopped over, a chipper smile on her face. What'll it be, Gilda? She asked happily. Gilda tapped her talons on the counter and replied. Chocolate shake, she said coldly. Coming right up, chirped Pinky as she hopped over to the blender to make it. I stood in my spot and began to turn to walk out. Well, nice seeing you again, I grumbled, without a hint of trying to cover up my utter indifference at her arrival. She hadn't even looked at me as I turned to go. Is that how you talk to the manager of the Wonderbolts? She said finally, dabbing her beak with a napkin as she took a sip of her shake. I froze where I was and slowly turned to her. What? I choked. She turned to me, a devious grin. You heard me. I guess they do have equal opportunity laws in Ponyville. Those buffaloes got their casinos, you know? My jaw gaped open, and I was about to ask how, but Pinky beat me to it, obviously not as in shock as me. Congratulations, Gilda, but how did a griffin manage to become in charge of the Wonderbolts? She asked, a derpy smile on her face. Gilda leaned over and grabbed a curl on Pinky's head. Rude. And why wouldn't a griffin be manager? She accused. Pinky merely smiled and shrugged. I don't know, she giggled. Gilda rolled her eyes and released the pink... You meant to type in Pinky, but it's pink, but with an E at the end. Gilda rolled her eyes and released the pink pony's mane and turned to me, that devious smile back on her beak. I came to Ponyville to offer you a spot now that I have a place higher up, she sneered, hopping off her stool, not even finishing her shake. I shook my head. No, Gilda, I can't. I can't leave Ponyville. I have weather pony responsibilities, and she ran over to me and stood in front of me, a growl rumbling in the back of her throat. Don't give me that weather pony bullshit, Dash. This redneck hick town isn't even close to good enough for the skills you possess. She loosened up and raised her head, a smile on her face now. Besides, with that stupid Fluttercry out of the picture, I winced when she called her Fluttercry. What have you got to lose? It's your dream, Dash. Don't let some pink-maned heartbreaking bimbo take your dream away. I stomped my hoof on the ground, demanding she be quiet. All right. How long are you going to be in Ponyville? I asked, my gaze trailing up to her eagle face. 2 days. You got until then to come find me and tell me your decision. She turned now to leave and walked out the door. She took one last look at me and raised an eyebrow. And choose wisely. With that, she spread her powerful wings and took one flap, projecting her into the sky. She was gone in the blink of an eye. She was still good. I stood looking down at my hooves when Pinky walked over to me, putting a hoof on my back. Dash, as much as I'd hate to see you go. I looked at her, my face wincing in pain. I felt more tears coming on. I mean, this is what Fluttershy wanted. My expression went from sad to mad, and I puffed up my chest, throttling over to the door. You're right. This is what she wanted. She wants me to leave, then I will. My confidence shrank as my stature did as well, and I hunched forward, slowly walking out of Sugar Cube Corner. I need to talk to her again. One last time, I mumbled. I turned to Pinky and threw a hug around her. Thanks, Pinkie Pie, I whispered, squeezing her tighter. She hugged me back and nodded. No problem. I'll always be here, Dashy. She smiled. I nodded and began to walk out of the shop and flew up into the sky as well. I had to go talk to Fluttershy again. I wonder if she was home at all. Occasionally, I have to push myself forward. I was way too afraid to face her now and look upon her face knowing that it wasn't mine right now, or if it'd ever be again. I took a deep inhale and knocked on her door, waiting for an answer. I promised myself I wouldn't cry, and I'd be strong, and I wouldn't show her how broken inside I was right now. Once she answered the door, and I looked upon those cyan eyes and that innocent blink she did, I broke that promise to myself almost immediately.